Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. James Smith Jr., and welcome to another episode of the Dr. James Show. Thrilled to be here. Thrilled that you came. I hope you brought somebody with you. And you're in for a treat today. Actually, not a treat. You're in for a happy meal. I am really looking forward to talking to our guest. He's someone that I met back in 2009 when he was a student for Rutgers University, their executive MBA program. And we've kept in touch via social media over the years. But this will be our first conversation since '09. I was there as faculty to teach a program on leadership and presentation skills, but he has done some amazing, amazing things. Just want to thank again the Pyramid Club for being our sponsor. Appreciate that. They are great for us. And want to remind you in the chat room, please ask your questions, put your comments. But let's get to Lawrence. Lawrence Hibbert, he is the co-founder, president, and managing partner of BCT Partners. They are a consulting firm that's based in Newark, New Jersey. And Lawrence is just a powerhouse. Let's get to it. Lawrence Hibbert, welcome to the Dr. James Show. Great to have you. Great to have you. Wow. $1 million. No, $1 billion. Looking good, Doc.
Dr. James, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Excited to be at this show, and thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. You have a lot to catch me up on. I remember I walked into class to teach. They always tell you, you can tell who the stars are. You in the front row, you're raising your hand, you're leaning in, you're asking questions. Have you always had that zeal for learning or that zeal for life?
I remember that MBA program, and I remember meeting you. Part of what you saw was what my mother and father instilled in us at a very early age. Education as an immigrant family was our pathway to a different life. And so for us, it was important that we be at the front of the class, that we not just represent the first name that you see written on your signature line, but you represent the last name, that you represent that in everything that you do. So you do your best. You show up and you show out and you keep working hard. So what you're seeing is what my mom and dad gave me, and I try to give my kids.
Now, was that sitting down lessons? Was that the reading? Was it the come in the room, sit down, man, I want to talk to you? How did they pour into you? What was their recipe, and how have you used that since?
Man, I think the first thing to think they poured into us was just a respect for certain values. The first value was hard work. Again, being an immigrant family, my mother and father came here in their early 20s.
Where did they move from?
They left a life from Panama. There's my mom there. I love her. She passed away in February, but her heart and her spirit continues to stay with me and my sister. She gave me so much. And even as I look into her eyes right now, she reminds me that you can do anything. She had a tough upbringing in at that time, a third world country, and decided to leave in her 20s to create an opportunity for her future children. And she and my father moved to Brooklyn from Panama and worked many jobs and found ways to get us both educated and exposed to new opportunities that we might not have seen if we had been in our home country. That's and amazing. So for us, it was pouring in that idea that you got to work hard and you got to be persistent as you do what you're doing.
You've done an exemplary job. We don't talk, but we follow each other on social media. And I've gotten a chance to see the amazing, amazing journey you've been on. Before I go into that, we have a little video that you and Dr. Pinkett speak to what BCT Partners is about. And after the video, I want you to share your thoughts on some of the things you guys are doing. So let's take a look at the video right now.
I'm Randall Pinkett, founder and managing partner of BCT Partners. And I'm Lawrence Hibbert, managing partner and founder of BCT Partners, where our mission is to provide insights about diverse people that lead to equity.
We create solutions that matter by focusing on insights to action and action to equity. First, we use data to drive decisions. Next, we ensure those acts transform people, organizations, and culture to achieve equity.
Passion, energy, expertise, and tenacity are vital to this work. Yet we also bring precision analytics and technology, AI, machine learning, virtual reality, natural language processing. We've been on the vanguard of equity issues in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, speaking truth to power and being bold and intentional to drive solutions.
BCT Partners improves lives and improves communities. It's our life's work, and it's our legacy. Since 2020, we've witnessed two pandemics, COVID-19 and racism. Their commonality is that they have illuminated the inequities in our society.
To address these inequities, we help people and organizations move to new equity-driven models. I mean, look at us. We've set out to uplift individuals and communities while making a profit, and we've succeeded.
Wow, I can't wait to unpack that. That's some good stuff. And before you dive in, I'm sure people who have not met you or your partner, Dr. Pinkett, yes, that is from Dr. Pinkett from The Apprentice. He spent a little bit of time with Donald Trump.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
I remember watching that, but today we want to talk about Lawrence. We want to talk about BCT. So talk about some of the things you mentioned in the video with regard to equity, speaking truth to power. You even say your mission is to provide insights about diverse people that lead to equity. Dive in, man. Dive in.
Oh man! First of all, I'm so excited to talk about BCT because it has really been almost a 30-year journey. BCT is the evolution of about 3 different companies over a period of time. And so BCT is our last instantiation of this brotherhood that started at Rutgers University. So I'm going to start with the end before we go to the beginning. But if I look at what BCT has been, it's a company that believes very deeply that we can, as engineers, as technical engineers, can impact society by using the analytic mind to address social ills. And we believe that the challenges that we deal with in society are complex, more complex than the physics and the calculus that we did in school.
And they call these complex problems. You need soft skills.
Absolutely.
Soft skills to fix it. Really? Soft? Okay.
Right. And so these are problems that require multidisciplinary approaches to it. You can't just be a technologist. You can't be just a sociologist. You can't just be a human services person and solve a problem that's related to emergency services or homelessness or children and family issues or employment or workforce development. They require an understanding of very complex ecosystems. And so what we've done at BCT is put together a team of multidisciplinary professionals that work together to solve complex social problems on behalf of the federal government. So we help the federal government either manage programs, evaluate programs, improve upon programs, and we use that by applying subject matter expertise, rigorous kind of analytics and innovation and know-how to deliver solutions.
Now you said this dream started when you were an undergrad at Rutgers.
Yes, sir.
And you were majoring in engineering. I think it was mechanical engineering.
Yes, sir.
So how did this get started? You and your friends say, come on, we want to be bigger than just a college graduate. We want to own our own business. You weren't out there going to parties and going to class and going to sporting events. You were thinking about your future?
Well, so, the truth is I was probably doing both, right? So just to be clear, I was at the party, right? And those that know me, like I love to dance and I love to be at a party, but I also was fortunate to be among a band of brothers that were a part of the National Society of Black Engineers. So if I paint the picture, Dr. James, if I paint the picture in the early 1990s, hip hop was really growing. They called it the golden age of hip hop, but it was a very conscious hip hop. So there was this conscious level that continued to push us and challenge us to not just have fun, but to think about our impact. And then we had a cultural movement, our own kind of awakening, that we didn't want to just find a job, we wanted to create a job. We didn't want to just be the consumer, we wanted to be the producer. Right. And so we were taught this in classes in 1990, 91, 92, that you could do more, that you could be more. And we, whether it was the principles of Kwanzaa, but we had this clear sense of self. And as we began to exercise this sense, we started reaching out into the communities and doing, as some of the work that you do, we did speaking engagements, and we started telling people about our journey, particularly about how they could become engineers. As we did more and more of that work, we were encouraging students, particularly students of color, to pursue things like engineering. One day, somebody came up to us and said, "We'll pay you for it." And as we began that journey, we built our first company, which was called Mind, Body, and Soul Enterprises. Nice. That company had two pieces to it. Had a retail sales division where we sold CDs because you couldn't get it on the internet. And then on the other side of that, we were selling educational services and training. So that was really the start of the company. And the genesis of that company was to be able to affect people's mind, their body, and their soul with information, knowledge, and music, because I wasn't scared to go to a bar.
You mentioned that in the 90s, that rap and hip hop was really, soaring. I remember back in '79 when I was a freshman in college, and this song "Rapper's Delight" came out. I'm thinking, no more rap. Rap's not going to last. And here we are today. Hotel, motel, Holiday Inn.
We done come a long way from a hip hop hip to hip hop.
But how did you guys cut your teeth so early? I mean, you hadn't had the formal training other than academia. So where did you go for training and development to help move your mission further?
That's a great question. And I tell young people all the time that Carter G. Woodson describes two forms of education, the one that you get and the one that you take. And the one that you take is often more valuable. It's important for students to recognize that college creates a unique opportunity for you to try so many things. And student organizations are the vehicle for that. So for us, Randall, Dallas Grundy, Jeffrey Robinson, myself, and a couple of others, we all were executive board members or leaders of a student-run organization. So we first learned how to work together in student organizations. Right. We traded positions of being president and vice president and executive board member, and we learned how to work with each other. By learning that, we learned how to write proposals. We learned how to balance, manage a budget. We learned how to manage teams. We learned how to execute. And that was the proving ground, the training ground. And that time it was MEET, the Minority Engineering Educational Task, the Rutgers chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers from Region 1. It was that organization that helped steward and develop the skills that we need to be able to launch this business.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We have a picture I want to show. I believe this is the executive team, but let's take a look. You'll correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, these are my guys. So from left to right, Dr. Randall Pickett. To my right, Dallas Grundy, one of my very best friends. All these brothers are my best friends. So, right. But Dallas was my roommate in college. And then to the far right is Dr. Jeffrey Robinson. So the story goes, Randall to the left, Jeffrey to the far right, college roommates. Wow. Dallas and myself, college roommates. And so we came in 1990. Jeffrey and Randall came in 1989. The organization saw this wayward student, me, not studying quite enough. And they said, we're gonna set you up in this big brother, little brother program with this tall guy to my far left, Randall. So Randall and I were connected through the big brother, little brother program. I watched him study. I watched him be the person that everybody knows him to be now. And so we developed this very strong bond early in the 1990s.
Man, that's spectacular. I don't know about you, being from Philadelphia, I would have had a hard time roommating with someone named Dallas, but I digress.
And Dallas is a Philly fan.
There you go. Dallas, I know you're watching this. That's what's up. Hang in there. Hang in there. We're going to turn this around. There's a question in the chat room I want to get to. It says, you mentioned the twin pandemics that we have experienced over the past year and a half. How has your business model changed or prepared you for these two life-altering scenarios that have affected the entire world? So the two pandemics, your business model, how did you pivot? What did you change?
So when I think about our story, we've always been social engineers. And when I say social engineers, it's the idea of using that analytic mind to address social challenges. From early on, we were always talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion back in the 1990s before it was really kind of commonplace. So for us, we had already been preparing, and the opportunity came with the unfortunate murder of George Floyd. And when that happened, the avalanche of opportunities came as there were organizations, corporations, nonprofits looking to get much more information about DEI and looking to transform themselves. The country had reached a point, really through the activism of young people, that they were willing to look honestly at where we are in our condition. And for us, that met our preparation. And we were prepared to begin to share the services that we have around DEI training and assessments and evaluations and the like. So that was the first kind of pandemic. The other piece that we were ready, though, is as an organization, we had built the infrastructure that allowed us to move into a remote work environment. We had enough back office, we had enough technology, we had enough tools that we did not lose any pace when our offices shut down. And in fact, our company began to speed up because our ability to scale and extend our services intensified because everybody now could be accessible as easy as this Zoom application.
To talk about the significance of scaling your business, it's something entrepreneurs need to know. They say for us as speakers, the speakers who do the best make a lot of their money while they're sleeping. Because mailbox money, scalability, they have other people who are doing their programs. They've been certified in their programs. They're basically driving revenue while they're home eating dinner.
No, it's a very important point, Dr. James. So a couple of things there. You can grow your company linearly. And for us, we're a consulting firm. So every time I get a project, I got to get some people. So I grow my revenue, I grow my cost. And it grows linearly. While that's a great model, that model requires you to work for every dollar. What you want to be able to do is to move to a model where you can build it once and sell it many times. And so that means that you've got to build assets that, much like the industrial age machine, that is a machine. It continues to move and produce many things. So I think we have to, as business owners, consider what are the kind of assets that I can develop that don't require me to actually build it every time it's delivered. And so for me, a consulting firm, a lot of our stuff is project-based, but we are building now a cadre of tools, toolboxes, solutions that you can purchase and buy. We build it once, we sell it multiple times, and that's how we begin to create the scale.
That's awesome. Awesome advice. Another question from the chat room, it says, can you recap again the elements or factors you use to address the complex social ills that are prevalent?
Yeah, so there are, for us, we think about this world in a triangle. So top of the triangle is that to address complex problems, you have to have domain expertise. You've got to really understand the area that you're addressing. So if it's welfare, if it's we've done stuff around abuse and neglect and exploitation of adults. You've got to understand the domain. We've done stuff around labor and labor studies. We've done stuff around workforce development. So we've got deep domain experts first. The second thing that we've got to have is an understanding of the context to which people work. And we call that organizational development. Dr. James, so this is around how people organize themselves in groups to be able to get something done. Now, we have to understand their skills, their talents, their capacities, their processes, and the like. So we have an organizational development component that we do as well. The third component for us is really innovation. How do we use technology to accelerate our understanding of all of those spaces? How do I use technology to take my expertise in a domain, plus my understanding of people, and really drive towards transformation? I'll give you an example. We do a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion work, and most people do training, but most people also would recognize that training in and of itself can be episodic. Once you go to one training, you get some awareness, and then you walk away and you're like, I really haven't changed my behavior.
That's right.
So the question for us is, how can we use innovation to drive behavioral changes? We've done a couple of things. We've created a virtual reality tool that allows for deeper levels of empathy. So you can put on goggles where you can now position yourself as a white woman or a Black woman sitting at a boardroom.
Nice.
You can look down and see your hands might be painted, and you're in a conversation with other people, and you're listening to the microaggressions that are happening around the table.
Nice.
So if I can get a white male executive to be in that immersion, he has a different perspective of the activities that may be happening at that table than he would in a typical training. And so for us, that is that triangulation that I talk about, and we try to apply those kind of innovative approaches to all social challenges that we have.
That's powerful. It's powerful because, well, for a number of reasons, it's powerful. But in sessions that I've done, typically you'll hear someone say, "That's not me. That doesn't happen here. I don't see that happen. You're making this up. All this data is contrived," but you're creating experiences for them to actually witness it and feel it.
Absolutely. And we start all of our DEI engagements with a DEI cultural assessment. The way that I'd like to think about organizations is the iceberg analogy. So if you see an iceberg is a massive, thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
a third of the iceberg is above the surface. 2/3 of the iceberg is below the surface.
Absolutely.
So that's how organizations present themselves. The part above the surface is what you see on the website. It's the pictures of that we're diverse. We practice equity. Everybody has a chance. We all are given a fair opportunity. This is a meritocracy. But then below the surface lies the stories, the norms, the values, the feelings. Those are the things that we have to be able to unearth. I know what we say that we're equitable, but why is only 1% of our executive team women? We say that we're diverse, but there has been no upward mobility for minorities or Blacks or Hispanics. We say that we're diverse, but we're not speaking to the LGBTQ community. So we've got to be able to assess really what we are, and we use analytic tools to do both. We call it mixed mode assessments, qualitative and quantitative assessments, to help us understand really what's happening below the surface. And once we bring that to an organization, we're now in a position to really address their challenges with the right kind of interventions to move them forward.
It's powerful. It's powerful, and I'm sure that aids with the assessing and measuring after whatever program, initiative, experience you've had with them, because people always say, how do you measure this? How do you know it's helping the organization? What do you tell them when you get asked that question?
Well, that's why the assessment, to your point, Dr. James, is really important, because it creates a baseline. And what we want to be able to do, and again, what distinguishes, and I saw a message pop up about what distinguishes us, really, we are combining analytics with organizational development and training. So we do assessments and evaluations, and then quantify the information to create a scorecard about where our preferences, where our ideas are organizationally. We also use administrative data to say, hey, and I will show you how it's playing out in your hiring practices. I will show this how it's playing out in your mobility, in your retention rates. And so once we can baseline that information, then we can apply an intervention. And that intervention might be training, it might be coaching, it might be mentoring. But at the end of that, we can see what have we done and what progress we've made? If we have not made enough progress, we can always go back and say, how can we remedy some of our interventions so that we can get greater impact? And for us, this data-centric approach to both evaluation, both DEI allows us to have very promising and powerful returns, and we're able to transform organizations, not just give them exposure.
That's great. That's great. I remember the quote that suggests when performance is the problem, training is not always the answer. So it goes beyond just the training. It's a skill, it's a will, it's a wherewithal, it's a mindset. And it sounds like you are providing both the quantitative and qualitative. And I believe some diversity organizations leave out the quantitative.
That's correct.
They're not able to articulate the business case. We all know it makes sense from a people-centric standpoint.
That's right.
But it's also an amazing business phenomenon.
Oh, my goodness.
Let me ask you, Lawrence, when you guys or the folks on your team, when you are in person and you are training and you are coaching, do you go out in diverse pairs? And if not, how do you handle the pushback you may get with the optics? Oh boy, here's another Black guy coming in to tell me about Black guys being misunderstood.
Yeah, there's a couple of dynamics there. First, you'd be surprised how many organizations hire non-Black firms to do diversity, equity, and inclusion first. And we are a Black-led, we're a Black-owned company, but a diverse-led organization. And so our management team is a combination of white males and white women and Black men and Black women and just folks all over the spectrum. So I think it gives us
100 employee staff, right?
We have 100 staff. For us, we can bring multiple perspectives, and we are able to kind of understand where a client is and bring the right kind of perspective to meet them where they are. So we can bring a professional in the DEI space that can be a white male that can really speak in ways that I might not be able to speak to problems. And then conversely, I may be able to come in and offer insights in places that a particular company can do. So I think that our diversity is really our strength. And being able to address these challenges. But the unique element that is allowing us to win is really analytics. I mean, when we add analytics, we try to get to the numbers. Now, the challenge that we have, Dr. James, is that when we see the numbers, there has to be bold leadership to want to do something about it. And that oftentimes is where the courage to have courageous conversations is required. The leadership and executive leadership is needed, and we've got to be able to coach and support folks through that.
Absolutely. Lawrence, for the folks who are loving this and want to reach out to you and follow up with you, how can they reach you?
Best way is through our website, bctpartners.com. My email address is lhibbert, LHIBBERT @bctpartners.com. And, we'll get right back to you.
Love it. Love it. Do you find that this work is getting harder, easier, or is it relatively the same?
I think that this work ebbs and flows across so many different customers. I think I would describe our customer base maybe in 3 ways. You have folks that want to create transformation in their organization. And they've got an open heart and spirit, and they're willing to do that. Some folks on the other side of this just want to check the box. And then you have other folks that are in the middle. They may have tried something, maybe it's not working, maybe they haven't done enough, but they're still trying to figure that out. We work best with these 2 boxes. We work best with those that want total transformation or partial transformation. We don't work as well for people that just want to check the box, because we want to be comprehensive and holistic. And if you're just looking to check the box, there's a couple other folks that we can recommend.
I was going to say, do you turn down work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we want to have long-lasting, impactful relationships in this space.
I love it. A diversity consulting firm that I worked for back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Simmons Associates, they had a term called vectors. A vector is a force with movement in direction. And they liken it to headwinds and tailwinds.
That's right.
And they would say that folks in underrepresented groups, every day for them, they're walking into a headwind. You can't see it, but you can feel it. And folks who are in the opposite group, they benefit from tailwinds, but you still can't see it. So they're moving up, they're ascending the corporate ladder. And many think it's because of performance.
Right.
They don't think anything else. But those who are walking through the headwinds, it's like, man, this is hard. This is hard.
This is
Why
hard.
is this happening?
I'm walking up the hill.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree. And I think that's the unconscious bias that we talk about. This unconscious bias, when you think about some of the racism that we deal with in this country, it represents itself at least in 4 different dimensions. The first dimension is that we can have personal biases. The way that we see other people are biased. I might see a person of a certain race and think a certain idea immediately. I might be scared. I might have some sense that they are really smart, or they're not smart at all, or they're accomplished or not accomplished. That's my own bias. The second thing that I have is interpersonal bias. So now I can take that bias and now overlay that in my relationship with Dr. James. Well, I'm not sure this guy, he really is a snazzy dresser, and maybe he's just trying to, snow me over here, right? And so automatically I have some kind of bias, right? And so that's my interpersonal bias. But now when I take those interpersonal biases and then wrap them into our institution, don't like guys that wear plaid jackets. In fact, I think we should have a policy that says guys that wear plaid jackets, they should never come into this company. That's institutional. And then we have systemic biases. That's when institutions work together to push out or crowd out a particular group. We saw that in redlining. That happens in the mortgage industry. We see that around educational systems. Those are concerted efforts where people get pushed out, where certain institutions working together create boundaries and headwinds that we can't come over. So we have to acknowledge those in all 4 dimensions and be able to speak truth to power to them.
That's good. Would you say your parents played a role in getting you ready to speak truth to power? Because many of us don't. We collude, we go along to get along, we fake it till we make it. We don't share our truth. So do you believe that your early rearing and some of your experiences played a role in you being able to effortlessly, unapologetically speak truth to power?
First, so Dr. James, you really got to think that you don't feel comfortable pushing yourself out if you don't feel really good about who you are. You've got to have a knowledge of self and a knowledge of who you are. You can't be defined by what other people say. And you've got to also then have a language. You have to have a vernacular, a way, a glossary of terms that helps you to communicate with clarity how you're feeling. Now, our school systems, whether it be elementary, high school, or college, do an inadequate job at teaching us about issues of sociology and race. And so because we're not giving kids and young people the kind of language around this, they know they feel something, but they don't know how to say it. And so I think that the combination of having confidence in who you are, but also having a language in to be able to communicate that is essential and critical.
It's great stuff. There's a question in the chat room that says, what do you see as hurdles regarding experiencing real equity progress in society, in business? So what are the hurdles? What's limiting us from reaching that pinnacle?
That's a great question as well. And so we've talked a lot about organization and workplace transformation. I want to talk a little bit about the way that equity affects the marketplace and the delivery of services. And so we know that people under certain conditions get crowded out or pushed out of opportunities. And not everybody's getting the GI Bill. Not everybody's getting the same kind of opportunity to go to schools and so I think the only way that you can fix it is you got to measure it. And so again, this goes back to our data piece. We've got to be able to evaluate what's happening within all of these ecosystems. You've got to be able to measure. We say that a program is successful because it's graduated, it's provided these kinds of services. We got to start asking, who are the services delivered to? Is everyone given a fair and equitable shot to get access to that? And all of the interventions the same. We know that in the criminal justice system, as an example, we say that there are ways in which Black and brown youth who have committed the same crime are treated differently than other folks.
Yes.
And so if you don't have a mechanism to be able to evaluate who is coming through the system, how are they treated, let me remove race and let's evaluate what their outcomes are, and then overlay race again and say, hey, did everybody get the same thing? Did Johnny, who went through this particular circumstance, and Jamal that went through this particular circumstance, be treated the same way? And oftentimes we're finding that's not the case. And so that's how we use data. And it doesn't have to be just criminal justice. It can be delivery of multiple services. But for us, using the equity lens in the distribution of service is an important element so that we can help, eradicate some of these barriers and create a world where everybody is getting the same thing.
I love it. I love it. I love that you're using the data, that you're speaking to both the left brain and the right brain, left side and the right side. This is amazing. There's a comment there that says, Lawrence, this is very interesting. Thanks. What typically is the main reason for a company to call for your assistance? What's typically the main reason for a lead to come in for a company to reach out to BCT Partners?
Right. No, great question. So I'm going to answer that in probably a couple of different views. If an organization is looking for DEI consulting, and they feel like they want to transform themselves, they would come to us, and they've already got a need. Maybe it's inside, maybe they've got some public, some stakeholder pressure that's saying, hey, you guys are not doing enough about this. Hey, we're a school, we're not doing enough. I need some help to address that. That's a reason for us to come in. But from a programmatic standpoint, what we're seeing, and even in the Biden administration, you see that there are executive orders, particularly around equity, and making sure that government dollars, taxpayer dollars, are going out equally to all different people. And so what we're seeing written into some of the contracts is you got to evaluate, yes, we're doing a particular government program, but is everybody getting the same thing? So we would service them by providing technical assistance to their program and overlay on top of that an equity lens to say, yeah, we're going to help you deliver services, but we're also going to make sure that those services are delivered equitably.
Good. This is good. I'm going to veer off just for a little bit and put you in the hot seat. You want to go to the hot seat? All right. Hot seat. With the hot seat, I give you a word and you share the first word that comes to your mind, the first word that comes to your mind. This is not a think to talk activity. It's a talk to think. I'll give you the word, bam, and we'll keep going. Are you ready?
I'm ready, sir.
First word is equity.
BCT.
Diversity.
Inclusion.
Entrepreneur.
Tenacity.
Communication.
Empathy.
Pandemic.
Crisis.
Wife.
Love of my life. I didn't give you too. I gave you too much.
No, I gave you a boo moment and you scored. You scored. How about leadership?
Leadership. Colin Powell.
Authenticity.
Mandela.
Resilience.
My dad.
Future.
My kids.
You are off the hot seat. Boom, boom. Let's stay with the boo moment. I think we have a picture of some people you might know. Let's take a look. And I want you to talk about them, the role they play in your life. Let's take a look at this awesome family.
Man. So to my left, I see my wife, Lawrence Hibbert. We are married 20 years. She is the love of my life. She is both my strength and the reason why I do what I do. So everything that we have is because we have a love together. So I love her. And then these are my two boys. They're actually a little bigger at this point. So they're both taller than me now. But this looks about 2 years ago. And that's my son, Caleb. He's now a 17-year-old junior. In high school, and my freshman, which is Joshua, is my youngest guy. So Yeah.
Now, you said you love to dance. Are you teaching them how to dance? I hear you. I hear you can bust a
Man,
move.
so
I hear you can bust a move. Let's take a look at Lawrence busting the move. Let's
oh
take
my
a look.
gosh, you got what? Oh
Busting
my
that
gosh,
move.
my gosh. The internet is undefeated. So these are some of my best friends from Plainfield where we grew up. And we were avid New Edition fans.
New Edition fans.
We were New Edition fans.
Oh, he went with the hands up in the air.
Seeing the rain, seeing the rain.
So you do find time to have some fun outside of your 25-hour day.
I do. You know, we got to keep this. We got to keep it in perspective, and that's where my family really helps me. You know, I'm fortunate to have the wife that I have that allows me the flexibility to do the things that I can do. But I owe it to them to be present. So for me, the funnest times that I have is being a coach on the baseball field.
Excuse me, you said coach. You said coach
Yes.
on the baseball field. I think we have some proof. I think we have some proof.
Oh man, yeah, these are my guys, man. This was a little while. This is probably when they were probably my 9U team. But I, you know, I love these boys. I love coaching. I love seeing the eyes light up as they get their first hit, or you know, they develop a skill that they hadn't developed before. I think sports teaches these kids about so many things, and it's been a privilege to be a coach over many years with my boys.
I love it. I love it. I coached a little bit too, and it's so rewarding. I wonder, and having seen you do it now, it is possible. I wonder from a coachability standpoint, it
Right.
seems that today's youth is different from when I was a little guy. And it takes a surreal amount of patience and understanding and leadership to coach these guys today.
It is a little different, and because so much probably when you grew up and I grew up, while we had coaches, so much was done in your peer group, and parents weren't the facilitators of your fun. I mean, my dad loved me, but he worked hard at the shop. And so, you know, he wasn't at every game, and you know, he tried to do what he could, but, you know, we had this community that helped to raise us. And so it allowed children to be self-reliant in a different way. They had to develop in a different way than we have now. So I think that affects how we coach kids tremendously.
Thank you. Thank you. Lawrence, we have some footage of you and Dr. Pinkett in the office. I want you to speak to what's happening. It looks like a day in the life of the partners at BCT. So talk us through what's happening here.
We had developed this video for the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year program. And so we are fortunate to have been selected as one of the Entrepreneur of the Year winners in the state.
Yeah, I saw that 2021.
Yes.
You guys were named by Forbes magazine as America's best management consulting firms.
Yeah. And so, first of all, thank you. And I want to thank my BCT team. This is not about Randall and I, because we don't lift all the work. It really is about a group of people that have been dedicated and have bought into a greater mission, a mission to have an impact on the world in ways that we could not do individually. So for us, this has been a BCT story. And what you're seeing is just the fruits of that overall labor and that hard work. I mean, we're proud to be named Entrepreneur of the Year for New Jersey, and we're looking forward to going out to Palm Springs, California for the national conference with Ernst & Young in November.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I also see that in 2019, you were named by Black Enterprise, the 100 top list, as one of the top African-American firms in the country.
Yeah, man. I mean, again, we're humbled by it. My dad, my dad wanted to be an engineer, and wasn't able to realize that dream because of the economics of growing, of the 60s. And by the time he's ready to go to school, my grandfather was a tailor. And so on a tailor's salary, he wasn't sending somebody to college, though my father was top 10 in his class. And so for me, I am the hope and the dream of what he attempted to be able to accomplish. So, very proud of him.
Well, in basketball, folks who got hops, we like to say they play above the rim.
Yeah.
You and BCT Partners are certainly way over that rim with regard to the work you're doing with the clients, the things you're doing in the world relative to inclusion and equity, the role models you guys are being as well. So, and speaking of role model, there's a question in the chat room that was right in line with where I was going. I was going to shift to entrepreneurism. And
Sure.
The question says, what advice would you give a young entrepreneur on going after a huge vision? What's the must need to do item or items? What are the must need to do items? A young entrepreneur, big vision, any advice?
Yeah, I've got a couple. And my kids like, oh, Dad, here he goes. Here he go again. First thing that you got to do is you got to know yourself. And it sounds kind of trite and overused, but the truth is that you got to know what you bring to the table. You've got to understand where your strengths are, and you got to have that honest perspective of yourself. We assembled a team. And that includes Dallas and Jeffrey and myself. And if I likened it to a basketball team, everybody can't be Michael Jordan.
Right.
Somebody's going to get a couple more shots than you do. But are you the kind of person that's willing to get rebounds? Are you the kind of person that was willing to get steals? Are you the kind of person that can set picks? And so you've got to figure out what you bring to the table and how you complement others. So you got to know yourself. I think the next thing is that you've got to be able to convince one other person that the vision that you have is worth spending their time for. Now, if you have an idea and you can't convince one other person that this idea is worth supporting, you may need to check your idea. Because sometimes we're not honest enough with ourselves. And sometimes you got a bad idea. I've had them. And you need somebody to be able to check yourself. I think the third thing that you need to be able to do is understand your market. You got to know your market. And when I say you know your market, you got to know your market like we might know our children. You got to know its preferences, its taste, its pain points, its desires, its gains, all of these elements. You got to understand your customer inside and out, even more so than the customer knows themselves. I'll give you a story. It's ironic that the iPhone was created without buttons, with just this massive screen, and we take it for granted. But before then, it was all buttons. Yeah. Like, how did Apple at that time know to create a phone that did not have any buttons when nobody was going around and say, give me a buttonless phone. Right. They understood their customer needs innately, and it drove the design and the innovation that became our first iPhone. You've got to do that to your business. You got to know who you're selling to and meet them where they are. Fourthly, you want to make sure that you establish a clear value proposition. That value proposition has to be defensible. You want to be able to show folks, this is why I'm doing it. Maybe it's because I can do it faster. Maybe I do it more effectively. Maybe I bring this kind of value, but I've got to be able to define that, understand that, communicate that. And then the last thing I'll say is that you've got to be relentless. You got to be relentless, but you got to be honest. Some folk, Dr. James, are relentless, but you're in here doing something that you just keep on bumping your head and bumping your head. And I'm not just saying to do something, but you got to have a council of advisors that will tell you, maybe you got a booger on your nose, right? And this thing that you have is maybe it's not the most effective way to do this work, and you need to course correct. So the last thing an entrepreneur needs to be able to do is to transform, and they've got to evolve. So I'll leave those as some tips for entrepreneurs.
Let me add one more to it, and it's one that you're going to share with us via the video.
Okay.
Let's check this out. It's around bouncing back.
Speaking of adversity, BCT Partners has failed up many times. 9/11, the housing crash, government shutdowns. If it's affected the country, it's affected our business. And there were times where we were ready to sell our homes and pack it in.
Yeah, I remember the day we had a meeting scheduled to decide whether we had to both leave the company and go get jobs. And then 1 hour before the meeting was scheduled, we got a call from a client who wanted to approve a proposal we had submitted. It was a sign from God to stay the course.
Failure has taught us how to be flexible, to reinvent ourselves and keep going so we can help others do the same.
You want to co-sign that?
Amen, amen, amen. I don't want to take you to church, but I'm going to tell you that if there's a seventh element to the comments that we've just been talking about, it's faith. You know, we know that from scripture that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. And sometimes you've got to believe in something that you don't see. And that's much of what business is, because it is a white piece of paper that all you try to do is impose your ideas upon. But you have to be able to have that faith, not only in, not only in some higher being, but also faith in each other, that we can get this job done together. I cannot say enough about how my personal faith has helped and shaped not only BCT, but the ethos, the way we treat each other. You know, the pot of gold is not at the end of the rainbow, it's in the journey.
Speaking of journey, how has this journey transformed your perspective on leadership?
Wow, man. You know, what I've learned is that leadership is not one thing. It's evolving. You know, when I look at men and women, whether they be, you know, the great titans like Gates and Bezos and, you know, and the like, what is so interesting to me is that these are the same men and women that started companies in garages with 1 to 2 people. And they were able to personally transform to the men and women that are steering ships of hundreds of thousands of employees. Like, not many people are willing to change and evolve. They say, Dr. James, that the new literacy is an ability to learn, to unlearn, and to relearn. Not reading, writing, and arithmetic, but the ability to learn something, to unlearn it, and to relearn it. And so you have to, as a leader, be able to evolve, see your blind spots, develop new understanding and perspectives, release things that are not working, and grab hold to something new. And I think if you can do that, you can be an effective leader.
I love it. And based on what I've learned, you not only do the presentations and the programs for BCT, you're out there speaking, conferences, workshops. We have a flyer of a picture of a flyer of a show that I believe was sold out. I want you to speak to this a little bit. Let's take a look. The Successpert Conversation Series. Talk to us.
So a very dear friend and Rutgers alum of ours, Alfred Edmonds, who you can't quite see his face here, who is the senior vice president for Black Enterprise, is a Rutgers alum. He's a friend of ours as well. This, and I don't know the date, but I feel like this represents our 20th or maybe our 20th anniversary year. And so he did a panel discussion with all 4 of, you know, the heartbeats over here. So we all got in.
I love it.
We all got into the room and just shared stories. We kicked it, answered questions similar to this, but shared the importance of this brotherhood that has allowed us to be as successful as we have been. And so there's so much to be said about what we've done individually, but so much more to be said about how we've been able to work together and stay together over the years.
And you have been successful. I mean, if you measure success by income, multi-million-dollar organization, but you've also been successful, 4 brothers coming together.
Yeah.
And stayed the course. Why do some entrepreneurs make it like you and your team, the heartbeats, and why do some fail? What do you think?
Man, you know, when you're building a company, you know, it is your creation. And like any creation, you've got great ideas. It's going to evolve. It's going to shift. It's going to move. And you've got to be malleable. You can't be so dead set on anything. You know, our first company was a training company, NBS Educational Services and Training. We ran that from 1993 to 2001. When 2001 hit and 9/11 and September 11th and all of that happened, our business, which was a training business, dried up. And at the point that the business dried up, Dr. James, we had a choice. We could stay the course and continue to try to make a training company work during a recession. We could have. Now, we probably would have hit our head and we might have died. Or we could have said, it's time to pivot. It's time to move. Great companies are able to keep themselves and are built to last because they're able to move. And so I think that for us, it has been that ability to evolve, the ability to change, and the ability to grow personally that's helped us to stay the course.
How, from a, I guess, testosterone point of view, you got 4 men working on one grill.
Yeah.
I think you answered it earlier by saying you played different positions during a different season, but is there any other special sauce, special ingredient that has kept you guys so cohesive?
Man, first of all, you got, being in business with partners is like being in marriage, right? And so if you and your spouse don't have the same values, if we don't think the same way about honesty, humility, if we don't think about how we share, if we don't have some fundamental agreement on that, we're going to have a problem in your relationships or in your business relationship. So for us, we're grounded in a spirituality that we all share. But we also exercise values that allow us to be humble. Randall Pinkett has 5 degrees. Jeffrey Robinson has 5 degrees.
Wow.
Dallas Grundy is, the chief financial officer of a major university in Ohio. And so if I'm going to spend my time trying to be Dallas or trying to be Jeffrey or trying to be Randall, I'm not doing myself a service. Right. So I'm reminded that we are more powerful when we allow our own lights to shine. And when we allow our lights to shine, other people are given permission to do the same. And so that's how we try to live our lives. And there's enough room for us all if we stay humble and stay focused on the goal.
I love it. I love it. At this portion of the show, we like to conclude with our guests turning into a motivational speaker or turning into a speaker in general, where they give a mini, M-I-N-I, a mini keynote. It could be on what you discussed today to wrap it up. It could be on another call of action. It could be finish the year strong. But we want Lawrence Hibbert, managing partner, BCT Partners, co-founder, to give us 30 seconds, some words of encouragement that we'll think about for the rest of the day and hopefully tomorrow, next week, and so on. So let me, mic check. The next voice you will hear will be that of Lawrence Hibbert.
First of all, Dr. James, thank you again for this opportunity. I want to encourage everyone that God has placed something very special in each of us, and that we have some innate talents and ability, but we have to give ourselves permission to exercise them. I want you to think about the dreams that you had when you thought you could fly at the age of 5 and 6. I want you to harness that little girl and harness that little boy and ask yourself right now, what's stopping me from flying? What's stopping me from being the person that I thought I was? Because right now we feel like a caged bird sometimes, but we still have the same spirit to do great things. So I say unleash those dreams, connect with people that would edify and support you, take risk, and go out and fly and be who God has made you to be. So thank you.
I love it. I hear another calling, but we'll talk about that later. Lawrence, it's been a long time, but you still have that flavor, that tenacity, that power, that wisdom. Thank you for sharing your dream, your past, your present, your future. Thank you for sharing you in the tools today. I told you guys, another show. We drop it like it's hot. Informational, transformational stories and tools that you can use right away. I want to thank the Pyramid Club again for being our sponsor. We'll see you next week. Bring somebody with you. And don't forget, You've just been impacted.